Welcome to this special edition of In the Lighthouse, your safe harbor from the storm, with your host, the Lighthouse Keeper, Daphne Collins, bringing you heroes of the Old Testament.
Hello, and welcome to this special edition of In the Lighthouse, your safe harbor from the storm. I'm Daphne Collins, the Lighthouse Keeper, here to bring you more stories of heroes of the Old Testament. In this episode entitled Villains and Vixens, we'll take a closer look at some of those anti-heroes of the Old Testament. I'm speaking of the colorful villains who brought drama and chaos to the lives of the main character. Whenever we read a story, our minds automatically begin to categorize the characters as they appear. Sometimes we label them good or bad based on their actions. We might even find ourselves rooting for a specific character, even if they're dark and sinister. It's not abnormal for this to happen. It's in our sinful nature. The people we read about in the Bible were just like us, imperfect and messy. They faced the same struggles in their society as we do in ours today. What labels them a villain is how they chose to react to their circumstances. The stories about these anti-heroes were written for our benefit, and so we could learn from their mistakes. The central hero throughout the Bible is God. He directly or indirectly interacts with the main character, instructing and testing them for his divine purpose. He allows and tests the villain too. So, how do we define what it means to be a villain? The villain of a story is normally considered an evil character. Some interpretations may portray him as complex and a victim of circumstance who chooses destructive paths. Ultimately, a villain is defined by their role as the antagonist, driven by destructive forces, though the depth and motivation behind these forces can vary greatly. The person becomes a villain through a combination of self-serving motives and a willingness to violate moral principles to satisfy their objectives. They typically ignore justice and the greater good because they feel justified by their twisted worldview rather than by any heroic ideals. The following are 3 types of villains. 1. The classic villain is someone driven by the thirst for power and a hatred for good. 2. The anti-villain is someone with noble goals but controversial morals and methods. 3. The societal villain is someone who feels wronged by the system and wants vengeance. How are vixens portrayed in a drama? In essence, a vixen embodies feminine cunning and the alluring qualities of a temptress. Calling someone a vixen is to view them as seductive, calculating, and holding to the classic understanding of a femme fatale. It's a versatile term that can be either a compliment or an insult, depending on the context. Some key features of the vixen include: 1. Seductive and sexy to indicate that she is glamorous, alluring, and carries an air of mystery and danger. 2. Fiery and temperamental to suggest that she is a woman with a sharp tongue and has a fiery temper. 3. Cunning and malicious, to mean that she is a woman who displays cleverness but is deceptive like a fox. She can be manipulative and malicious if it suits her whims. The biblical characters whose names appear in this module are male and female archetypes who could be labeled anti-heroes. Their objective is to play antagonist to the main character, thereby creating a dramatic tension that requires divine intervention. The Lord God will act, and the main character is taught a universal and valuable lesson. So how do you distinguish the actual villain or vixen in the story from the intended main character? Is it possible that they are one and the same? Perhaps you've heard the idiom, desperate times call for desperate measures. Some people will foolishly resort to desperate measures that lead to devastating consequences if not for God's intervention. Let's see just how desperate these people were. Okay, let's get started. How to survive the end of the world. The daughters of Lot. Many people understand what it means to come from a dysfunctional family, and, if they're honest, they could identify specific reasons for its dysfunction. This first story highlights the character of a family leader. That leader is Lot, the nephew of the patriarch Abraham, and his troubles began when the two men decided to part ways after years of sojourning together. Lot chose to settle east in the Jordan Valley, whereas Abraham went west to settle in Canaan. The narrative fast-forwards years later and takes us to Lot, who has a wife and 2 daughters who are engaged to be married. The family lived in Sodom, a major city in the plain of Jordan, notorious for its extremes of immorality and indifference to the plight of the poor and needy. Lot's presence at the city gates suggests that he held a position of influence in the city, yet struggled with living righteously in the midst of so much iniquity. While in the course of his regular duties at the gates, God sent 2 destroying angels to the cities of the plain. Lot met them at the entrance and offered them the hospitality and protection of his household. He had no idea that their presence would cause the men of Sodom to swarm his house and demand to engage in unnatural sexual relations with the strangers. And even more shocking is Lot's response to their demand. He said to the men, "I beg you, my brothers, do not act so wickedly. Behold, I have 2 daughters who have not known any man. Let me bring them out to you, and do to them as you please. Only do nothing to these men, for they have come under the shelter of my roof." Angered that Lot would offer his daughters rather than the 2 strangers, the men pushed forward to attack Lot, believing he was judging them for their demand. They couldn't care less about Lot's hospitality or protection, even if his daughters were offered in sacrifice to uphold the honor of his house. It was the angels who saved Lot and his daughters from the marauding men and the imminent destruction of the cities. They told Lot to take his family, flee the city, and go to the mountains. Lot's intended sons-in-law did not believe him when he told them the city was soon to be destroyed. They chose instead to remain in Sodom. As the family fled, Lot's wife turned to look back at the destruction of the city and was suddenly turned into a pillar of salt. Lot and his daughters fled to the village of Zoar, which was spared from destruction because God saved the small village for their benefit. However, upon hearing the explosions, screaming, and wailing going on all around them, they fled to the mountains and stayed in a cave while the world around them was being burned by fire and brimstone. As time passed and the smell of sulfur remained heavy in the air, Lot's daughters, mistakenly believing they were the only ones alive, contrived a plan for extending their father's name in the world. The older sister said to the younger, "Our father is old, and there is not a man on earth to come into us after the manner of all the earth. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, that we may preserve offspring from our father." Both young women agreed with this plan, and the older sister plied their father with wine and went to his bed to seduce him while he was intoxicated, yet still able to serve her objective. The text specifies, "He did not know when she lay down or when she arose." The next day, the older sister said to the younger, "Behold, I lay last night with my father. Let us make him drink wine tonight also. Then you go in and lie with him, that we may preserve offspring from our father." That evening, Lot once again became intoxicated from drinking too much wine, and this time the younger daughter went into his bed and seduced him into having sexual relations with her. The text once more indicates that Lot was unaware of when she lay down or when she arose, to demonstrate his vulnerability. Both of Lot's daughters were impregnated by their father as a result of their incestuous plot. Although the text doesn't go into any detail about the period of awareness when Lot discovered that both his daughters were pregnant and that they were the only ones living in the mountain cave, he was the one who fathered the children to be born. Both women gave birth to healthy sons. The oldest named her son Moab, which means "from my father," explicitly pointing to their incestuous union. This son later became the founder of the Moabite peoples. The younger daughter named her son Ben-Ami, meaning "son of my clan," a name that also suggests his questionable conception. Ben-Ami became the founder of the Ammonites. Both nations, whose founders were conceived in sin, would later become the source of much suffering and trouble for Israel. The story leaves us with several questions, primarily about Lot, whose choice of moving to the cities of the plain became the source of his family's disgrace. This is a cautionary tale of how easily we could return to our carnal natures if we remain apart from God's guiding spirit. Lot's daughters were the fruit of his undisciplined tree, and ultimately the mothers of two wicked nations. Another vixen from the Old Testament with security issues that beckoned back to Lot's daughters also resorted to desperate measures. Her story is also found in the book of Genesis. When promises are broken, God intervenes. Tamar. A covenant is a promise, an agreement between parties. It brings with it the understanding that when a yes is spoken, it becomes your bond. The covenant was especially important to a widowed Canaanite woman who married into an Israelite family. Her name is Tamar, and her story is found in the 38th chapter of Genesis, a breakaway tale nestled within the story of Joseph, the son of the patriarch Jacob and his wife Rachel. Tamar is the daughter-in-law of Judah, another son of Jacob and his other wife Leah. Judah arranged for Tamar to marry his eldest son, who turned out to be a wicked man in the sight of the Lord, and was subsequently put to death by God, which left Tamar widowed. Because his son died before a child was born to the union, Judah arranged for Tamar to marry his second son, Onan, in accordance with the Levirate law. Levirate, which literally means a husband's brother, is a practice that, if a man died without a child, it was common for the man's unmarried brother to marry the widow in order to provide an heir to the deceased. A widow would marry a brother-in-law, and the first son produced in that union was considered the legal descendant of her dead husband. Judah said to his son Onan, "Go in to your brother's wife and perform the duty of a brother-in-law to her." Onan was more than willing to have relations with Tamar, but secretly he had no desire to give her a child. Onan knew that the offspring would not be his, so whenever he went in to his brother's wife, he would waste the semen on the ground so as not to give offspring to his brother. In other words, Onan was taking selfish advantage of the Levirate marriage arrangement. He enjoyed having sex with his sister-in-law, but he purposefully avoided impregnating her. What Onan did was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and he too was put to death. Tamar was now widowed twice, and Judah's third son was yet still a boy and not marriageable. Judah recommended that Tamar return to her father's house and live under his protection until his third son, Shelah, came of age to marry her. Obediently, the widowed Tamar did as her father-in-law instructed and remained unmarried until she learned that Shelah was of age, and further, that Judah had no intention of honoring his promise. Tamar decided to take matters into her own hands and began to conceive a plan. She'd heard that Judah, his friends Hirah, and his son Shelah were returning to town for sheep shearing, and knew it was time for her to take action. She changed from her widow's garb into something that would attract male attention and covered her face with a thick veil to hide her identity. Then she waited at the side of the road where she knew they would pass. Judah, as it turns out, lost his wife during the time they were away, saw the woman at the side of the road, and believed her to be a prostitute. He inquired about the cost of Tamar's time. She bartered with him, but her plan was not to take him at his word. Instead, she required a guarantee of payment. She asked, "Your signet ring and your cord and your staff that is in your hand." Bargain struck, Judah had sexual relations unknowingly with his daughter-in-law, and she conceived and became pregnant. Days later, Judah sent his friend Hira back with the young goat he'd promised Tamar in payment of her services and for the return of the items he left with her as a guarantee of his payment. His friend returned to tell him that the men of the town informed him that there wasn't a prostitute living in the town. Not wishing to draw any more attention to himself, Judah decided to let the woman keep the items and went on his way. The narrative goes on to say, about 3 months later, Judah was told, "Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has been immoral. Moreover, she is pregnant by immorality." And Judah said, "Bring her out and let her be burned." As she was being brought out, she sent word to her father-in-law, "By the man to whom these belong, I am pregnant." And she said, "Please identify whose these are, the signet and the cord and the staff." Then Judah identified them and said, "She is more righteous than I, since I did not give her to my son Shelah." When her time came, Tamar gave birth to twin sons, who were born breech from the womb. Their names were Perez, which means breech, and Zerah, whose hand was tied with a scarlet thread when it first came from his mother, but went back in to make way for his twin, who was delivered first. Tamar's calculation netted positive results. Judah, now the sire of his daughter-in-law's children, became her means of support without insisting she marry another son. Nor did she have relations with Judah again. Moreover, her son Perez, heir to Judah's son became the ancestor in the messianic line of Judah, and therefore an ancestor of Jesus of Nazareth. The Lord God, despite Judah's unkept promise and an incestuous union that resulted in a pregnancy, intervened with the purpose of ensuring that his promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was kept. God will always uphold his name and receive the glory. Grumbling in the wilderness, Korah's rebellion. What happens when discontent is bottled up inside and gives birth to bitter envy? Our first villain is a Levite who was a member of the grumbling generation that emerged from the Exodus from Egypt. God declared that this generation would never enter the promised land. His name was Korah, a Kohathite responsible for guarding the sanctuary and the holy implements within the tabernacle. Korah served under Aaron's son Eleazar, who oversaw the items in the tabernacle. But Korah, resentful because of his lowly rank, was embittered because he wasn't made a priest. He grumbled with his fellow Levites, Dathan, Abiram, and On, who believed that Moses and Aaron somehow conspired to exalt themselves above the assembly of the Lord. In a conspiratorial rebellion, Korah and his friends gathered 250 men to challenge Moses' authority. Apparently, Korah fancied that he could do a better job leading the people instead of Moses. But he never considered that by leading this revolt against God's appointed leaders, Korah was actually revolting against God. Within Korah's heart was pride, greed, and a lust for power. It was not Korah's or Dathan's or Abiram's leadership that God sought. Who's to say for whom or what God's sovereign choice becomes? God chooses and equips for his service according to his will. Moses, disturbed by the disgruntled mob, made a proposition with Korah and his fellows. He said to Korah, "Be present, you and all your company, before the Lord, you and they, and Aaron tomorrow. And let every one of you take his censer and put incense on it, and bring before the Lord his censer." So Korah and all the men joined Moses and Aaron at the entrance of the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord appeared to all the congregation. They brought their censers and burned them before the Lord as instructed. Then the Lord told Moses and Aaron to move away from the wicked, scheming men so he could destroy the entire congregation. Moses and Aaron interceded on behalf of the people apart from Korah and the grumbling mob who were responsible for the rebellion. God heard their plea and told them to have the congregation move far away from the tents of Korah and the others. After everyone moved away, Moses pronounced a curse on Korah, Dathan, Abiram, and their families. Immediately, the earth opened and swallowed them, their entire household, and all their possessions before the chasm closed. And suddenly, a fire came down from the Lord and consumed the 250 followers who also offered incense before the Lord. Despite witnessing the harsh judgment against Korah, the leaders, and their families, the people continued grumbling against Moses and Aaron. The Lord heard their grumbling and sent a plague to silence them. Moses said to Aaron, "Take your censer and put fire on it, and carry it quickly to the congregation and make atonement for them, for wrath has gone out from the Lord. The plague has begun." So Aaron did as he was instructed and made atonement for the people. By the time he returned, 14,700 additional people perished from the plague, thereby quieting all the discontented grumbling in the presence of the Lord. Because Korah was a Levite, the tribe chosen by God for the purpose of leading the people in worship, he became the de facto leader of the rebellion, even though Dathan, Abiram, and their cohorts received equal punishment. This was to serve as a lesson to the people that God is holy and would not tolerate defiance of his decrees or his chosen leaders. Furthermore, they could not approach his presence and offer him whatever they chose. Instead, they must obey him in everything. Villains operate from a heart that devises wickedness, causing harm to anyone who crosses their path. However, God will use a villain to meet the purposes of his divine will at any given time. Our next villain learns the hard way that God will thwart the schemes of the wicked and turn them into blessings. Even giants fall. Israel on the move. The book of Numbers continues the saga of Moses leading the people through the wilderness toward the plains of Moab, east of the Jordan River. God guaranteed Israel's great defeat of the Amorite kings Sihon and Og of the lands of Heshbon and Bashan, respectively. What is worth noting is that King Og and his sons were the last of the giant race of the Rephaim in Canaan. The utter defeat of this particular king and his sons greatly alarmed King Balak of Moab, who witnessed their defeat from his vantage point. The land Israel took was immediately adjacent to the territory originally belonging to the Moabites. This placed the Israelite camp in the plains of Moab, just east of the Jordan River and north of the Dead Sea. What was King Balak so worried about? If the God of Israel defeated the Amorites, who defeated Moab and claimed what was formerly land belonging to the Moabites, what would he do to Moab? He received news that the people of Moab were in terror of the Israelites' convergence along his border. Therefore, he devised a plan to dispatch an emergency message to Balaam, a prophet living in Pethor, Mesopotamia, a renowned center for divination and magic in the region. This is the message Balak sent to Balaam. Behold, a people has come out of Egypt. They cover the face of the earth, and they are dwelling opposite me. Come now, curse this people for me, since they are too mighty for me. Perhaps I shall be able to defeat them and drive them from the land. For I know that he whom you bless is blessed, and he whom you curse is cursed. A prophet for hire. Balaam. The Bible contains rich and powerful stories of the prophets who received messages from God to proclaim good and bad news to God's people and the kings who ruled over them. Many of these Old Testament prophets were close confidants to the kings of Israel, beginning with King Saul and continuing through Israel's return from captivity to Jerusalem. Many were prophets for hire, whose exchange involved performing specific tasks related to their profession. There were those who chose to engage in divination for additional payment. Their value and price were contingent on the success of their prophetic utterances and overall reputation. Some of these men, or women, were mages whose gifts came from years of study and apprenticeships, whereas others were sorcerers whose innate power came from an unknown source. The term false prophet connotes the source of their utterances, whether it's from Yahweh, the God of all creation, or one of the many pagan deities. Balaam was a widely known prophet for hire and was paid handsomely for his services. Although he knew his heart was not right with God, he actually heard from God. In this instance, Balaam was not a false prophet despite his wickedness. God used him for his purposes, and in this story, those purposes were for the benefit of Israel. It is indicative of the way Balaam responded to the message from King Balak. The prophet knew that this would be a profitable assignment since it came from a king as an urgent message. However, he also knew that he was bound by God's approval of this request. He needed God's permission first. He invited the king's messengers to stay the night so that he could inquire of the Lord. The next morning, the messengers returned to King Balak and announced that Balaam refused the invitation to come and curse Israel. The king sent even more noblemen to deliver the urgent request to Balaam again, this time offering great riches and promises of honor he would bestow on him. But Balaam could only reply, "Though Balak were to give me his house full of silver and gold, I could not go beyond the command of the Lord my God to do less or more." However, that night the Lord commanded Balaam, "If the men have come to call you, rise, go with them, but only do what I tell you." So the next morning, Balaam rose, saddled his donkey, and followed the men back to Moab. But God, angered by Balaam's inability to resist the promise of fame and fortune, sent an angel to oppose Balaam on the way. Balaam's donkey could see the angel holding a drawn sword on the road, barring their way. Balaam, however, did not see the angel and viciously struck the poor animal who was protecting her master from the angel of the Lord. Suddenly, the animal's tongue was loosed by the Lord, and she rebuked Balaam for beating her when she was only protecting him from danger. Then the Lord opened Balaam's eyes, and he too saw the angel on the road and fell face down to the ground. Then the angel spoke to Balaam, "Why have you struck your donkey? Behold, I have come out to oppose you because your way is perverse before me. The donkey saw me and turned aside from me. Surely just now I would have killed you and let her live." Then Balaam said to the angel of the Lord, "I have sinned, for I did not know that you stood in the road against me. Now therefore, if it is evil in your sight, I will turn back." And the angel of the Lord said to Balaam, "Go with the men, but speak only the word that I tell you." So Balaam went on with the princes of Balak. How many times have you devised a plan and convinced yourself that it was the Lord who revealed it to you, when in reality you were simply acting on your own desires? And how did you react when circumstances arose to thwart your mistaken plan? Did you see the potential danger? Did you obey the warnings and change course? Or did you blindly proceed forward because you just knew it was from the Lord? Remember, Balaam was a prophet for hire who heard from the Lord, yet engaged in divination to his own detriment. Balaam was motivated by the promise of money and fame that he would receive if he did as King Balak of Moab requested. The problem he knew was that God intended to bless Israel, not curse them. Therefore, the king's contract would not be fulfilled unless another alternative strategy could be contrived. Balaam soon found that, despite the two opportunities he took to curse Israel, his commandeered tongue could only bless them as God willed. The king told Balaam that if he was just going to keep blessing Israel, he might as well return home, and their agreement was null and void. However, he agreed to give Balaam one more try. He brought Balaam to the top of Peor, overlooking the desert, and showed him the sacrifices being offered on the altars. But once again, the Spirit of God came upon Balaam as another blessing was uttered in Balak's presence. How lovely are your tents, O Jacob, your encampments, O Israel. Angered by this final oracle of Balaam, Balak told him to leave and receive no honor, which the Lord withheld from him by blessing Israel instead of cursing them for the sake of Moab. Because of this, Balaam, at no cost, gave the king 4 additional prophecies concerning Israel in the latter days. In these prophecies, Balaam foretold the destruction of Israel's enemies, which included Moab. He even spoke of the coming of the Messiah. Then Balaam left Moab and returned to his home. Although Balaam was unable to curse Israel and receive his payment, he later devised another way around God so that the Moabites could defeat Israel. He recommended that the Moabite women seduce the Israelite men and convince them to turn away from worshiping the one true God. The women of Moab did as Balaam suggested, and for this act of rebellion, God sent a plague that killed 24,000 Israelites. Because of this treachery, Israel waged war against Moab and delivered them a crushing defeat. When Israel's army returned with the spoils of war, Moses looked and became angry with the commanders. Have you let all the women live? Behold, these, on Balaam's advice, caused the people of Israel to act treacherously against the Lord in the incident of Peor. And so the plague came among the congregation of the Lord. Now therefore, kill every male and kill every woman who has known man by lying with him. But all the young girls keep alive for yourselves. And as casualty of war, Balaam, son of Beor and prophet for hire, fell dead to the sword. Reputation brought Balaam to King Balak's attention, and with him oracles concerning the defeat of Israel's enemies. Our next story comes from the book of Judges and introduces a villain who tormented Israel for decades, only to meet his unexpected demise at the hands of a woman whose legendary victory had been prophesied. The Hammer and Peg, Sisera. This next story takes place during the time of the Judges, long after Joshua divided the land and settled there. The powerful leadership the people had grown accustomed to was gone after the death of Joshua. As it was with the generations that left Egypt, a recurring cycle of sin became the predictable pattern. Angered by their sin, God would punish Israel with crushing blows from the Canaanite nations surrounding them. When the people cried out to God for help, He would relent and raise up a judge to rule over the people and subdue their enemies. Years before Deborah's time as the 4th judge over Israel, the Canaanite commander Sisera tormented the tiny nation with his 900 chariots of iron. He was commissioned by King Jabin, who reigned in Hazor, a prominent city-state, to crush the growing strength of the Israelite tribes. By Deborah's command, Barak assembled the men of Naphtali and Zebulun at Mount Tabor to subdue the hill country. The land was initially taken decades earlier by Judah, but they could not drive out the inhabitants of the plain because they had chariots of iron. Because of the might of Sisera's war chest, the Israelites were crushed through the balance of power in the hill country for 20 years. King Jabin sought to prevent them from gaining control of the land, which was rich in resources and strategically situated near the sea. Commander Sisera and his iron chariots were Jabin's strong arm of control against Israel. Deborah, Israel's prophetess and judge, encouraged Barak to muster the armies against Sisera. The general was defending the Canaanite-controlled territory in the northern hill country. He specifically targeted the region of Galilee and the Jezreel Valley. Barak, uncertain that his forces were strong enough to defeat the Canaanite commander, agreed, but only if Deborah would accompany him. He knew that Sisera and his chariots would have a strong advantage over Israel's 10,000 men. Deborah agreed to go with Barak, but she informed him, "I will surely go with you. Nevertheless, the road on which you are going will not lead to your glory, for the Lord will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman." Deborah went with Barak and his 10,000 men to Kadesh at the plain of Esdraelon to face Sisera's army. When Sisera heard that Barak and his men were approaching from Mount Tabor, he called forth his army and his 900 chariots of iron in two formation near the Kishon River. Then Deborah's voice called out loud to Barak, "Up, for this is the day the Lord has given Sisera into your hand. Does not the Lord go before you?" The narrative continues. And the Lord routed Sisera and all his chariots and all his army by the edge of the sword. And Sisera got down from his chariot and fled away on foot. Barak pursued, and all the army of Sisera fell by the edge of the sword. Not a man was left. But Sisera fled away on foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, for there was peace between Jabin the king of Hazor and the house of Heber the Kenite. And Jael came out to meet Sisera and said to him, "Turn aside, my lord, turn aside to me, do not be afraid." So he turned aside and to her into the tent, and she covered him with a rug. And he said to her, "Please give me a little water to drink, for I am thirsty." So she opened a skin of milk and gave him a drink and covered him. And he said to her, "Stand at the opening of the tent, and if any man comes and asks you, 'Is anyone here?' say, 'No.'" But Jael, the wife of Heber, took a tent peg and took a hammer in her hand. Then she went softly to him and drove the peg into his temple until it went down into the ground while he was lying fast asleep from weariness. So he died. And behold, As Barak was pursuing Sisera, Jael went out to meet him and said to him, "Come, and I will show you the man whom you are seeking." So he went into her tent, and there lay Sisera dead, with the tent peg in his temple. The death of Sisera weakened King Jabin's control over the Israelites because of God's deliverance from his oppression. Because of their military dominance, the Canaanites were certain they would defeat the Israelites, who were outnumbered and powerless against the 900 iron chariots. What King Jabin never once considered was Israel's God's intervention on behalf of his people. And Sisera certainly underestimated the cunning of Jael, the wife of a nomadic Kenite, whose powerful swing of a hammer into a tent peg put an end to 20 years of dominance. Deborah's prophecy was correct. Sisera was felled at the hands of a woman. Our next story contrasts Deborah, who was a judge from the tribe of Ephraim, with Samson, a judge from the tribe of Dan. When God raises up a judge to lead his people, he expects them to lead righteously. But what happens if that seemingly righteous judge encounters a beautiful vixen with treachery in her heart? It's a tale of a carnal and flawed man who falls under the spell of a femme fatale, only to learn the consequences of pride and disobedience in service of the Lord. The Nazarite Judge and the Treacherous Vixen, Samson and Delilah. When watching an exciting drama in the comfort of your home, do you ever find yourself secretly cheering for that misunderstood and flawed anti-hero? What is it about this character that draws your sympathy? Is it because you identify more closely with him in contrast to the perfectly lovable hero who, in the end, gets the girl and rides off into the sunset? The anti-hero in a story can portray the protagonist, or main character, who lacks the more laudable qualities of a hero, such as morality or bravery. They tend to act according to their own self-interest, using questionable methods to achieve their goals. Such qualities are found in the man whom God called to action as judge over Israel when the Philistines were their constant oppressors. His name is Samson, the son of Manoah, who hailed from the tribe of Dan. Unexpected and unusual tidings of her imminent conception were spoken to Samson's mother from the angel of the Lord, a theophany, who said to her, "Behold, you are barren and have not borne children, but you shall conceive and bear a son. Therefore be careful and drink no wine or strong drink, and eat nothing unclean. For behold, you shall conceive and bear a son. No razor shall come upon his head, for the child shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb, and he shall begin to save Israel from the hand of the Philistines." This special designation is first mentioned in the book of Numbers and requires a special vow to remain set apart for maintaining good standing with the Lord, provided the vow is obeyed. The following were the instructions given for remaining set apart according to the Nazarite vow. "He shall eat nothing that is produced by the grapevine, not even the seeds or the skins. All the days of his vow of separation, no razor shall touch his head. All the days that he separates himself to the Lord, he shall not go near a dead body, not even for his father or mother, for brother or sister, if they die, shall he make himself unclean, because his separation to God is on his head. All the days of his separation, he is holy to the Lord. As he grew into manhood, Samson's parents ensured that their son understood and strictly adhered to the requirements of the vow. No matter how much time and effort we put into parenting, a child will ultimately make their own choices when they grow into adulthood. Manoah and his wife never anticipated that their son would be so easily led astray once he left the safety of their home. The life of this 12th judge would prove to be a contradiction of everything he learned. Key indicators of his sinful and carnal nature would soon surface as he faced the world, the flesh, and the devil. The first indicator arose when Samson went in search of a wife. He stunned his parents when he told them he'd selected a Philistine woman and instructed his father, "Get her for me, for she is right in my eyes." Thinking that perhaps their son had a hidden agenda known only to Samson and the Lord, his father did as instructed by making arrangements with the girl's father. They would, of course, have preferred Samson to marry a Danite woman, considering God's law forbidding intermarriage between the pagan nations in Canaan. Instead, Samson had eyes for a Philistine woman and was determined, despite any Philistine or parental objections, that she would be his bride. During the course of his father's marriage negotiations, Samson killed a lion that crossed his path and left it on the side of the road. On his return journey, he came upon the carcass of the dead lion and ate from a honeycomb that he found hidden inside it. Never once did he consider that his action violated the Nazirite vow against approaching something that was dead. Samson continued to break the vow when he brought the honeycomb home to his parents and they innocently ate of it. He did not tell them that the honeycomb was found in the carcass of a dead animal. Another indicator of a character flaw occurred over the course of his wedding feast. While Samson, a Nazirite set apart for God, heavily imbibed on wine, he proposed a wager with his guests. He gave them a riddle to solve and challenged them to answer it by the last day of the feast, offering a reward if they did. They were, of course, unsuccessful in discovering the answer to the riddle and threatened Samson's Philistine bride and her father's lives if she couldn't get the answer from Samson. So she systematically and tearfully wore him down for the answer, and when he told her, she shared it with the men who accepted the challenge. When Samson realized he had been tricked by his bride and was required to pay his portion of the wager, he vengefully took the lives of 30 men for their fine garments. After he paid his portion, he left his bride unconsummated and returned to his parents' house. Believing that Samson was reneging on his part of the marriage contract, the bride's father gave his daughter in marriage to Samson's best man, who remained behind. When Samson's temper calmed and he returned to see his bride, her father informed him that she was no longer his because he had left her without fulfilling his marriage contract. She was now fully married to her husband, who had been Samson's best man at his wedding. Samson's desire for vengeance, spurred on by his hatred of the Philistines, led to a series of actions in which he displayed supernatural strength. This alarmed the Philistines and prompted them to take notice. One particular incident that left the Philistines determined to find the source of Samson's strength was when he single-handedly struck down 1,000 of their men with the skull of a donkey's head. They agreed to wait for an opportunity to catch Samson off guard and bind and arrest him. Their opportunity came in the form of a beautiful woman from the valley of Sorek, which lay between the territory of the Philistines and the land allotted to the tribe of Dan. The woman's name was Delilah. They arranged for the two to meet. As soon as the Philistine lords heard that Samson was spending all his time with Delilah and appeared to be in love with her, they bribed her to learn the source of Samson's strength. They said to Delilah, "Seduce him and see where his great strength lies, and by what means we may overpower him, that we may bind him to humble him. And we will each give you 1,100 pieces of silver." These Philistine lords had dealings with Delilah before and knew she would be dependable for carrying out this particular mission. Furthermore, they knew that Samson had a weakness for Philistine women, and Delilah would bring on his downfall. It was clear from the beginning that Delilah had every intention of discovering Samson's weakness and reporting it to the Philistines. The offer was one she couldn't pass up, even if she began to have feelings for Samson. Thus, she began her campaign of steady pressure to pester Samson to reveal the secret of his strength. She playfully said to Samson, "Please tell me where your great strength lies and how you might be bound, that one could subdue you." The two were inseparable, and Delilah became very aware of Samson's feelings for her. Appealing to his supposed love for her, Delilah went at him repeatedly. Samson would try to appease her with something, and later she would awaken him with a warning that the Philistines were upon him. Despite this game of cat and mouse, Samson continued to lie about the source of his strength 3 times. Yet for some reason, he did not pursue wisdom and leave Delilah and return back to his people. He simply refused to accept the danger he was in. Nevertheless, Samson remained, and on every occasion, Delilah reported what he told her to the Philistines, who continued to wait for the opportunity to pounce. Samson somehow knew deep inside that Delilah was planning to betray him, yet still he foolishly gave in to her seductive skills. Finally, worn down from her nagging, Samson told Delilah the truth. His strength comes from his long hair, uncut because he was a Nazirite. He confided to her, "A razor has never come upon my head, for I have been a Nazirite to God from my mother's womb. If my head is shaved, then my strength will leave me, and I shall become weak and be like any other man." Treachery awaits the fool who gives his blind trust to a vixen. She will cut you every time. The inevitable betrayal happened as soon as Samson fell asleep, his head resting lazily in Delilah's lap. Delilah called on the Philistines crouching nearby and instructed them, "Shave off the 7 locks of his head." After they cut off his locks, as before, Delilah shook him awake. "The Philistines are upon you, Samson." Hearing a noise, he said to her, "I will go out as at other times and shake myself free." But he did not know that the Lord had left him. And the Philistines seized him and gouged out his eyes and brought him down to Gaza and bound him with bronze shackles. Delilah did not give a parting glance to her mark Samson as he was dragged away. Her assignment completed and paid in full, Delilah returned home to the valley of Sorek and was no longer mentioned in the narrative. This extraordinary story demonstrates how spiritually blind Samson had become long before his eyes were gouged out. His arrogance and willful disobedience of the very vow he swore to adhere to caused him to miss the fact that the power of the Lord had left him. He became so steeped in sin and bound by it spiritually, even as his wrists were bound with bronze shackles. God allowed Samson to be humbled by his own weakness at the hands of a treacherous woman. In the next story, we are introduced to a villain who is humbled by a noble woman and a man destined for kingship. These characters are found in the book of 1 Samuel. A fool by any other name. Nabal. This story takes place during the sheep shearing season when David and his men were on the run from King Saul. They hid themselves in the desert wilderness of Paran in southern Judah. As they patrolled the area, David observed shepherds watching over great flocks of sheep in Carmel, and as a customary courtesy, protected these men and the flocks from wild beasts and potential attacks by marauding brigands from the Arabian desert. He understood their vulnerability since he, too, grew up in a shepherding family and watched over his father's flocks. This vast grazing land in Carmel was owned by a wealthy Calebite named Nabal from the nearby town of Maon. This man's name means foolish or lacking moral worth, and David would soon learn about the character of the man who fully lived up to his name. Everyone understood that once the shearing was complete, a large celebratory feast would soon follow. And given the largesse of the flocks owned by Nabal, it would be a great feast indeed. David, knowing that his army would enjoy some rest and good food, sent 10 young men to request provisions from Nabal. He instructed them to say to him, "Peace be to you, and peace be to your house. and peace be to all that you have. Your shepherds have been with us, and we did them no harm, and they missed nothing all the time they were in Carmel. Ask your young men, and they will tell you. Therefore, let my young men find favor in your eyes, for we come on a feast day. Please give whatever you have at hand to your servants and to your son David. It was customary, according to the cultural and social mores of the ancient Near East, to show hospitality, especially during festive seasons such as sheep shearing, when feasting would take place. The host would provide shelter and food, particularly if the landowner is prosperous. This was considered their sacred duty towards sojourners. David and his men had served as a wall protecting Nabal's property against marauding thieves. In this context, the request for food was not seen as begging, but as a reasonable expectation of payment for services rendered. What David did not expect was Nabal's inhospitable and insulting response. David's men returned with Nabal's rude message. Nabal said, "Who is David? Who is the son of Jesse? There are many servants these days who are breaking away from their masters. Shall I take my bread and my water and my meats that I have killed for my shearers and give it to men who come from I don't know where?" Nabal was not only refusing to offer hospitality, but doing so after benefiting from David's protection of his property, making this insult all the more egregious. Furthermore, Nabal's dismissive rhetoric as to David's identity was insultingly absurd. Unlike Nabal, David was widely known for defeating the giant Goliath and for his success as King Saul's military leader. Indeed, Nabal knew exactly who David was, yet he used this opportunity to insult David, calling him a disloyal runaway servant as an excuse for not sharing his provisions. It is therefore understandable in their cultural context for David to call his men to arms to defend their honor against the ungracious imbecile who refused to adhere to God's law of hospitality. He and his men protected Nabal's property from any harm that would have befallen them during the shearing, and therefore expected their kindness to be reciprocated. And this is the gratitude he showed. Why would Nabal risk his household and its security so foolishly? Perhaps it was his fear of King Saul and the possibility of testing his volatile anger. He knew of David, but he also knew about the king's retribution. Nabal was protecting his own skin and was willing to defy the hospitality laws and customs. Meanwhile, as David and 400 of his men armed themselves, one of Nabal's servants went to his wife Abigail, whom he knew to be a noble and practical woman, and told her all that transpired. He said, "Behold, David sent messengers out of the wilderness to greet our master, and he railed at them. Yet the men were very good to us, and we suffered no harm when we were in the fields, as long as we went with them. They were a wall to us, by night and by day. All the while we were with them keeping the sheep. Now therefore know this and consider what you should do. For harm is determined against our master and against all his house, and he is such a worthless man that one cannot speak to him." Immediately, without informing her husband, Abigail ordered that provisions be sent to David and his men. She also planned to meet with him and make a personal plea for his forgiveness for her husband's folly. As soon as she saw David, Abigail went face down before him and humbled herself with words that caused David to relent from his anger against Nabal. She said to him, "On me alone, my lord, be the guilt. Please let your servant speak in your ears, and hear the words of your servant. Let not my lord regard this worthless fellow, Nabal, for as his name is, so is he. Nabal is his name, and folly is with him. But I, your servant, did not see the young men of my lord, whom you sent. Now then, my lord, and as your soul lives, because the Lord has restrained you from blood guilt and from saving with your own hand, now then, let your enemies and those who seek to do evil to my lord be as Nabal. And now let this present that your servant has brought to my lord be given to the young men who follow my lord. Please forgive the trespass of your servant, for the Lord will certainly make my lord a sure house, because my lord is fighting the battles of the Lord, and evil shall not be found in you so long as you live. If men rise up to pursue you and to seek your life, the life of my lord shall be bound in the bundle of the living in the care of the Lord your God. And when the Lord has done to my lord according to all the good that he has spoken concerning you, and has appointed you prince over Israel, then remember your servant." Abigail's quick thinking saved Nabal and his property from David's retribution. Her gentle beauty and humble apologies calmed David, and he called off his planned attack. As far as David was concerned, his dealings with Nabal were at an end because of Abigail's intercession, but the Lord was yet to apply his divine judgment on the foolish man. When Abigail returned home, her husband was hosting a feast fit for a king and was quite drunk, so she did not tell him what she had done. The next morning, as Nabal sobered from his night of feasting and drinking, Abigail told him what she had done to appease David. After hearing her news, Nabal suffered a stroke or heart attack and lay paralyzed in his bed. He lingered in this state for 10 days, and then the Bible reports that the Lord struck Nabal and he died. God struck down Nabal because of his wickedness, greed, and selfish refusal to provide hospitality for David and his men, despite their protection of his property. Nabal, whose name means fool, insulted David, the anointed future king, and showed hard-heartedness, prompting God to intervene in judgment and prevent David from taking vengeful action himself. We now come to our final character, the quintessential vixen and wicked queen of Judah. She is the daughter of another notorious queen, whose name caused hearts to shudder in fear. Although her name hasn't been spoken of as often as her mother's. The name Athaliah is historically remembered as Judah's only queen and the ruler who nearly executed the entire line of Davidic kings. Judah's wicked queen, Athaliah. A dynasty was established in the northern kingdom of Israel by Omri, who was formerly the commander of the army under King Elah. The king's chariot commander, Zimri, killed the king in a coup and seized his throne, only to rule for 7 days before the people revolted. Word of Zimri's coup reached the army, and they made Omri king over Israel. They immediately besieged the city of Tirzah, and Zimri, who saw that his end was near, set fire to the royal palace and burned it down upon himself, perishing in the blaze. Omri's rule as king was initially contested, as half the people of Israel supported a rival named Tibni. With his military support, Omri overcame Tibni and solidified his hold on the throne. With the Omride dynasty came a period of stability for Israel, and the kingdom began to expand with the building of the city of Samaria, which later became the new capital, replacing Tirzah. Unfortunately, Omri was a villain and did evil before the Lord, as did all the other kings of the northern kingdom. As the head of the newly founded dynasty, Omri left a lasting historical mark on the world through his military prowess. His granddaughter, Athaliah, was the last of the Omrides, although the dynasty ended when her brother Jehoram was killed by Jehu. She was queen regnant in the southern kingdom of Judah. It is because of her wickedness that this queen is remembered. Athaliah, daughter of King Ahab and Queen Jezebel of Israel, married Jehoram, the son of King Jehoshabeath of Judah, and became queen consort. Her marriage solidified a treaty between the kingdoms of Israel and Judah. She was very much like her mother, Jezebel, who, after Ahab's death, strongly influenced her daughter's power in the southern kingdom. Queen Athaliah proved to be as depraved as her mother and turned her own husband's heart from God. Not only did Jehoram invite Baal worship in Judah, but he also killed his brothers to consolidate power. He was cursed by God through the prophet Elijah to a painful disease of the bowels until his death. Following her husband's death, Athaliah and her mother Jezebel continued their wicked influence on Ahaziah as they done with his father. He was Athaliah's youngest and only remaining son to ascend the throne. His older brothers were killed during a raid by the Philistines and Arabs when he was a small child. This left him as the only heir of his father for the throne of Judah. Ahaziah's reign, however, was short-lived, as prophesied by Elijah. He and his uncles and cousins were killed by Jehu just as God promised. Jezebel was also killed by her own servants at the order of Jehu. With her grandfather's dynastic line swept away by Jehu's hand, and never one to miss an opportunity, Athaliah contrived a diabolical plan to take the throne of Judah and rule as its queen. Now that Athaliah's husband and son were dead, she seized power for herself. However, for her to become the sovereign ruler of Judah, Athaliah had to remove the line of succession to the throne. That meant killing her son's heirs, her own grandsons. She ordered that the boys be killed, but one of them escaped the queen's edict. But Jehoshabeath, the daughter of the king, took Joash, the son of Ahaziah, and stole him away from among the king's sons who were about to be put to death, and she put him and his nurse in a bedroom. Thus Jehoshabeath, the daughter of King Jehoram and wife of Jehoiada the priest, because she was a sister of Ahaziah, hid him from Athaliah, so that she did not put him to death. And he remained with them 6 years, hidden in the house of God, while Athaliah reigned over the land. Who was this quick-thinking woman who thwarted Athaliah's plan? Jehoshabeath was Athaliah's stepdaughter and aunt to Joash, the remaining and rightful heir to the throne. She was married to the high priest, Jehoiada, and the two of them kept him hidden in the temple until the appointed time came to anoint him king. As queen, Athaliah used her influence to further establish Baal worship in Judah, installing priests and building altars for the idol in and around the temple of the Lord. She was strikingly similar to her mother in her actions. Queen Athaliah, despite the meaning of her name, God is exalted, did not exalt God. She would soon learn that God would deal violently with her. In the 6th year of her reign, Jehoiada the priest and his supporters brought Joash to the temple on Sabbath, put the crown on his head, anointed him as king, and proclaimed, "Long live the king!" When Athaliah heard the news, she raced to the temple and declared Jehoiada and his supporters traitors to the nation. Nevertheless, with the heir of David revealed to the nation, and the captains of the army aligned with the rightful king, Jehoiada ordered that Athaliah be removed from the temple and put to death. Once her death was carried out, and Joash was officially established as king, Jehoiada made a covenant between the Lord, the king, and the people, that they would be the Lord's people, and between the king and the people. And all the people of the land came to the house of Baal and tore it down. They thoroughly smashed his altars and his images in pieces. Thus the house of Omri was no more, and the house of David was restored in Judah. Athaliah, the vixen queen, who nearly eliminated the Davidic line, met a violent end just like her mother Jezebel. One dynasty was crushed and sent to obscurity, while the branch of Jesse's stem continued its fulfillment in the person of Jesus Christ. We have heard how our biblical heroes and heroines performed extraordinary deeds in the stories of the Bible. We have also learned how their antagonists, whether villain or vixen, thwarted their plans. But Because it was God's will, they overcame the obstacles and succeeded. When we read these biblical narratives, we stumble upon an anti-hero, learn his flaws, and sometimes find ourselves secretly rooting for him. We learn lessons from their complicated lives, and then we see the machinations of the villain or vixen playing against the actions of the hero or anti-hero, and we hiss and boo at them. Questions begin to form in our minds. How can they do such a thing? Why did he or she do that? We start to form assumptions and create arguments. I would never do that. If you had done this, then this wouldn't have happened. But the truth is, we don't know how we would act in the moment. We just assume we would. We have a choice in how we respond to life situations. Our choice would likely reveal whether we fit the archetypal hero-heroine or act against someone as a villain or a vixen. And like those who've come before us, our actions will be judged by the same God who judged them. I hope you enjoyed listening to this presentation of Heroes of the Old Testament, brought to you by In the Lighthouse, your safe harbor from the storm. I was happy to present this story about those villains and vixens that show up in the Bible. As I mentioned earlier, they're the colorful characters who bring chaos and drama. We learn lessons from them, and depending on where we are in our walk with Jesus, we might identify similarities with our own sinful nature. God, who is perfect, is not seeking perfection in us. He desires that we are to be holy as He is holy. Holiness can only be accomplished by believing in the finished work of Jesus Christ at the cross. Before He died, He announced, "It is finished." And 3 days after being buried in a borrowed tomb, the risen Christ walked out of that tomb with a glorified body, seen by as many as 500 eyewitnesses. He is now seated at the right hand of the Father in heaven. One day, He will return to earth to claim His church. If you enjoy hearing these tales about the heroes of the Old Testament, please leave a comment below this video. Transcripts for this and all future episodes can be found in our show notes on the blog page of our website. And speaking of our website, we'd like you to visit us at the Lighthouse at www.carrythelightministries.com and look for our tab on the homepage. We invite you to subscribe to this channel, share our videos with your friends, and like us on social media. I'm your Lighthouse Keeper, Daphne Collins, with Carry the Light Ministries. Until next time, be blessed.